going to create a hello world widget. Every environment needs its own hello world example. So we're going to make a hello world ChiliPeppr workspace and widget. So I'm going to go into the TinyG workspace, which is working great for me. I'm running CNC jobs successfully. Things have been good. I've got this huge G-code file in view here. It's 250,000 lines of G-code, so that's pretty heavy. Although I'm going to switch over to the lighter ChiliPeppr logo. That's only 572 lines. Okay, so that we've got this workspace, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a hello world widget right in here, maybe right between the Axes widget and the TinyG widget. So I'm going to use the term widget a lot. Widgets are just these little mini user interface panels that are scattered throughout. So there's 3 widgets here. There's the G-code, the serial port widget, and then this right here kind of more represents a workspace object as opposed to a widget. I know it might look the same, but it really is the parent object of all of these sub-widgets. So here's what we're going to do. I'll just give you a quick sort of walkthrough. There's this thing called the boot script, and I am going to do that as the last step. The boot script is what boots the workspace from sort of the root level. I'm going to fork this workspace at some point, but the first thing I want to do is I want to fork a widget. So the best thing to do to create a widget is pick one that's the most similar to what is the widget you're going to create. And I'm gonna fork this TinyG widget because it's actually one of the simpler widgets. I know it might not seem like it. Has the least amount of code. So I'm gonna go here and say fork widget. It's gonna open it up into JS Fiddle. If you haven't used JS Fiddle, you've got your HTML, you've got your JavaScript, your CSS, and then your view. So you're seeing this little TinyG widget is running by itself in JS Fiddle. I'm going to go ahead and hit run again because I want you to just notice that some of the data is updating in here. It's not getting that data from the serial port because there's no serial port widget in here. It's actually getting that data from this block of text what the serial port would do. So it's best to test your stuff in JS Fiddle before you kind of merge it back into your main workspace. So let's go ahead and fork this. So I'm going to hit fork. I'm going to get a new URL up there. And the first thing I like to do, because that title, I don't want to get confused, is I'm going to change this and call it widget hello world. And then I also like to change this description. So this widget is just a hello world. And then the external resources, the reason it's best to fork is you need these two. You need the Bootstrap CSS and you need this require.js file. If you're a JavaScript guy, require.js is a way to manage JavaScript libraries and dependency trees, and it's pretty important to all of this. So as long as you've got those two, you're good to go. Now I'm going to modify my HTML, and I'm just going to do some really simple stuff. I'm going to call this widget hello instead of widget TinyG, and then this first button group I'm going to get rid of. These buttons, before I delete them, are these 3 buttons right here over on the right. So I'm going to drop them. In fact, just for the sake of seeing what happened, I'm going to rerun it, and you should see them gone. So they're not there anymore. Then I'm going to go down to this button group, which is the drop-down menu. I'm going to delete this commented out stuff. You don't need it anyway. And I'm going to rerun. And you might not notice much different. It was commented out anyway, but there's a little pull-down menu there. So we're getting that cleaned up. And then we're going to rename this title. This TinyG is what shows right here. So we're just going to rename it Hello World. And then we'll rerun it. By the way, Control-Enter in JS Fiddle reruns. You'll get really good at that shortcut command. So there's our hello world. And then see this body here. we're going to name hello dash body, and we are going to just get rid of everything inside the body. Okay, and then we'll get rid of that too. And I'm just going to and then hit Control Enter. There we go, nice and cleaned up. And then I'm going to rename this to just be the hello footer. I'll point out that the reason these IDs are really long is, let's say, Riley, you wanted to make one or a whole bunch. You might do synthetos instead. It's kind of what Java did with their package naming so that there were less conflicts out there. If other people write widgets and you're worried about namespace collision, it is best to try and give it longer names that will not collide, and that's why I kind of came up with this notion of just the domain name. Okay, so I'll rerun that again, looking pretty clean. Notice though, I don't have anything in my pull-down menu. It's really hard to hit this pull-down menu inside JS Fiddle. It should be an empty menu, and it is. By the way, I don't need any CSS. I'm just going to select all and delete. And then I'm going to come down here. So notice it's ChiliPeppr Widget TinyG. I'm going to rename that to hello, just to make it consistent with this ID. They don't have to be the same, but you might as well. Now, this is one of the first things to really understand about ChiliPeppr's model. This is the require says make sure that you require this named object, and that named object is defined below. And so require that, instantiate it, and pass in a variable to this function by that name. And so then I got to say hello.id and hello.init. You'll understand a little bit better what that is. So I won't run any tests, but the widget. If I don't do that, you won't get some of the JavaScript functionality. This end test, by the way, is very important because in JS Fiddle this code runs, but when you pull it into the main workspace, the server parses this out as it passes the JS Fiddle content back to the main browser. And so you can run test code that is cleaned up upon instantiation. So we're also now going to change this to hello. This is the true definition of the ChiliPeppr widget hello JavaScript object.
Hey John, go ahead and bring up the QA screen if you don't have it up too.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, com.company.widget version something else is.
Actually, he just messaged me. He got kicked out. He's joining back in. Dennis, message me when you get back in. We'll answer that question.
Yeah. So you want me to answer it, or is he not back in?
Just keep going. We'll wait till he jumps back in.
Okay. So yeah, I guess really it's just this question of the naming scheme. I am not using dots anywhere. I'm using dashes, mostly because you cannot put dots in Java in the DOM for IDs or class names. So you got to use dashes. So you'll see I could have used dots in here, but I went with dashes as well, just to follow the same convention. Also, every object in ChiliPeppr is dependent on the ChiliPeppr ready library. And what that means is that this is really the base operating system set of JavaScript, and you are dependent on it. Things like chilipepper.load, chilipepper.subscribe, those are all loaded from this dependency automatically for you into the JavaScript namespace. So you could, if you wanted, instead of the word ChiliPeppr, you could pass in something like CP and then do cp.subscribe, CP, but you don't really need to because I just use the global namespace. But anything you define here in this dependency will get passed into here. And I say that because notice this is an array. And if you added some other stuff like, jQuery waypoints, I'll show you how to define that probably in future videos, but you can just do this whole list of dependencies. For now, though, this is a hello widget, so there are no real dependencies. I'm going to also modify this ID. This doesn't really mean much. It's more informational. but I'll show you where it gets used. I'm going to get rid of this implements object because it's not being used. URL and fiddle URL, name and description, you're going to want to keep. Publish, we're going to get rid of, but I'm going to leave an empty object. I'll get rid of that. For and subscribe, we'll get rid of that. We'll clean that up. And then we'll get or pause it and resume it. Those were needed for the other widget. And then the init function is a pretty, except for the fork setup and the sort of just the log statement saying this is done loading. And now I'm going to get rid of all the code except for that fork setup. And I want to actually change this to be hello. We'll just delete it out, and then we'll make sure this is correct down here. Hello. And then we will rerun. So that seemingly ran successfully, and if I get a popover, that means my fork setup code ran. And if there's stuff in the menu, there we go, com, ChiliPeppr, widget, hello, pub sub. So I'm going to go open this. Notice it has the correct ID, but the URL of xxebz is not what I have up here. So I need to fix that, and then this is still saying the old description. So let's go up and fix that. So the URL, I'm going to just steal the 5 elements there, put them in here. Again, these aren't really needed by this to run successfully. They're only needed for informational purposes and to make sure these pull-down menu items work. So when other people want to fork this widget, they can. If you don't do that correctly, your widget will still work, but nobody will be able to fork it correctly. And then the name and description are really what I put up here earlier. So I'm just going to copy those, or I'll just retype them. So we got widget hello world, and then this widget shows, here, we'll just copy it from here. A little bit of copying, but there we go. Now let's rerun. We'll reopen. So hard to hit this menu. Okay. We'll reopen this, and this is just hello world. That looks correct now, and there's no pub sub, so we're good. We've got a really clean widget to start with, and I will now hit update. Notice I'm on revision 1, and I'll say set as base. So I have a nice, clean, ready to go widget. Now, I'm going to go back, and I'm going to fork the workspace. So I'm going to fork it right here. This is really step 2, is forking the workspace. Notice I have a full instantiation of the workspace in here. I'm always amazed that that works well because this is just loading gobs of stuff. But it does, works great, and now I need to, first thing I'm going to do is rename this. So it's workspace hello world. Remember the last one was widget hello world. So widget hello world. So this is workspace hello world. And then, so this is workspace for hello world. Keep that clean. We might as well come down here. Well, we'll start with the HTML. This is the workspace layout for the hello world workspace. Now, I'm going to keep everything pretty similar. I'm not going to change any core IDs because too much CSS would have to get modified. But what I am going to do first of all is I'm going to change this title right here to at least indicate I'm in the hello world workspace. So you just got to kind of go through here and find it. That's the 3D viewport. That's the G code. I must have passed it already. I'm not sure why I'm not finding it. This is the workspace header. Oh yeah, right here. Duh. Okay, workspace. Hello world. And then we'll just hit Control Enter and rerun just to make sure we're saying, there it is, workspace hello world. Cool. I know this looks a little jumbled. You can hit Control Shift up arrow to drop the left side to give yourself a little more room. That looks a little cleaner. But I need some room here. Okay, I'm going to insert the widget right here, right between TinyG and Axes. So what you got to do is kind of go through here and just look at where stuff's at. So this is the G-code list in the serial port, so that's on the left side. 3D viewers in the middle, and then XYZ and TinyG here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just copy the XYZ, paste in there, say hello world widget, and then I'll just rename it to something like hello, load, hello world, and I will rerun, and I should get a hello world right there. Cool. So I'm going to replace that with the dynamic ChiliPeppr.load of the widget I created earlier. So let's also rename this ID to WS Hello. We didn't fork this yet, so actually that's dangerous. I need to hit fork right now. Okay. That was a little dangerous because since I'm the owner of the main workspace, I would have actually overwritten it. If you're doing somebody else's JS fiddle, you can't overwrite their stuff. It forces you to fork it. So I'm safe though. I don't think I overwrote anything. Okay, so here's my new ID. I'm going to go ahead and update this to just make sure it's accurate. I'll rename this. Notice this is consistent with the widget in terms of the ID, the URL, the fiddle URL, the name, and then the description. So we'll just change this to hello world. And then I'm going to leave everything else the same. I don't want to muck with it. What I will show you though is I hit Control Enter again. I should get, if I do see that com ChiliPeppr WS hello, that means it picked up that ID. And if I go to pub sub, I should get the updated description. So I'm safe. That looks good. And then the key is I've got to swap this with my widget that I created in step 1. So you'll notice as you go through this that they're kind of loaded in order. So like that zip whip texting widget is loaded right here. That actually sends you a text message when you're done running your job. And then it loads the drag drop element, which is this. And then it loads the workspace menu with the workspace billboard. That's this menu. This billboard right here, as I'm calling it, is actually in its own JS fiddle. And that's so it can be reusable. If you remember, this was on the home page. It's also when you go to the workspace viewer, it regurgitates that JS fiddle. So this is really showing 3 JS fiddles in one view. So that's why you do it separately. The 3D viewer is loaded that next. Then the G-code list and the serial port log window are on the left side. So that's these items here. Then there's the XYZ and the TinyG. So because I want to put it between those two, what I'm going to do is copy the XYZ, and I'm going to load the hello world right here. So hello world widget. And let's grab the URL, and we're just going to put it in the comments, but I'm going to also put it in the code. And I got to tell it what ID to load from. So I called it hello. And in fact, I'm going to throw that pound in there for the ID. So remember right here, I'll show you where I created that if you remember earlier. Hello world widget. Okay, so what it's going to do is it's going to inject the widget inside this div. It's going to basically replace this HTML, JavaScript, CSS all inside there. But it needs an ID to pull from the DOM to inject it into. So that com ChiliPeppr hello has got to be specified here. So it's basically the DOM element you're going to inject the code into once it's loaded, and then what code it's loading. And then this is being run as a callback after ChiliPeppr loads. And so what you do here is you say CP require, and that's a ChiliPeppr require statement, meaning once this is loaded, I now need to get access to the JavaScript from that widget. That's one of the maybe most brilliant items here is It's dynamically loaded JavaScript that I then need to get a reference to. And so I need to make sure that this name, this ChiliPeppr widget hello with the word inline, is this name where I've defined that JavaScript object, because it's going to then return this object to me. So it's very important. That, by the way, is the same thing that's happening in the CP require test method, is it's getting access to this definition, putting it into a variable called hello, and then you can run hello.init. I need to do the same thing here. So I've got hello, and then it's going to pass it into a variable called hello here, and then I need to init it. I'll show you what happens when I don't init it, but I'm going to go ahead and hit run, and you should see the hello world widget right there. Bada bing. We got ourselves a widget. Now, I'm going to show you if I comment out hello.init that I don't get that pull-down menu, because that pull-down menu is only generated from JavaScript code. So here's hello world still there, and I don't get it. So the init is just sort of a standard, and you don't get this little popover widget with the description. So let's uncomment that out, rerun it, and now I should get a popover. Yep, and I should get my menu populated.
So, John, like just like kind of interject from like an outside point of view is like, why is this kind of like cool and like groundbreaking? Because this widget says hello world right now, just for everyone else going to listen to this later, but it actually could be your spindle controller or your laser controller or your 3D printer heated bed controller and all that stuff. And I'll allow you to go on, but I just wanted to kind of like say, what is cool about this? Why does this? Why are we doing a screencast for this? And you go, describe that more.
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it. Anything you want to do to extend now, it's really easy to do inside a CNC app. I mean, imagine if you could extend Mach 3 as easily as this. You'd have like a whole world of plugins to it, or any app that's been successful through plugins.
Or I mean, even outside of like functionality, is like, I hate the way that you draw your grid.
Exactly.
I think it should be XYZ, yellow lines, black background, or whatever.
You got it.
Yeah,
because if you wanted to fork the 3D viewer because you hated the way I did it, just go hit fork, and here's your whole 3D viewer all by itself, and go hog wild. Good luck learning all the 3JS stuff, but if you want to, and then
but I mean, you could
make
just
your own workspace.
hit the CSS in the top right and make it a different color if you wanted it.
Exactly.
Because of XYZ reasons. But
yeah. Or if you wanted to do plugins, like this tool head, right? It's a cone. I think it'd be sweet to be able to pick different tool heads, like different bit sizes, or if it is a 3D extruder, like actually show a little column of plastic being extruded as part of the simulator.
At the 0.04 or 0.4 filament size or whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But in a way, this is then more of an operating system for CNC than it is an app. And once it's an operating system, like any operating system, you can install apps on top of it, and they all kind of work together. It's just that you need somebody kind of set up a core structure for how they interact, and that's what I've done here.
So like somebody could totally write for lack of a better word, slicer for the 3D community.
Absolutely.
But more so a CAM processor that you could drag like DXF or STLs or whatever, set your bit size, and be able to do all kinds of craziness on your 3D viewer. Like that's a pocket operation, and go for it. I mean, you could really do that.
Yeah, you absolutely could. And it's funny because just yesterday I added this little texting widget, and I did it the same way I'm doing the Hello World widget, and it came together so quick. And I know when the job is done running because this little G-code widget sends that off as a pub sub statement. So, I just wanted to get a darn text message when the job was done, and it was so easy to do. I know this layout's a little weird.
Now, I know that's your company, but like, can anybody use that, or is that?
Yeah, anybody can use it. Just put in your phone number and it'll text you. So let's finish this with the final step. Okay, now that we've got it in here, it's looking good. I'm gonna go ahead and hit update, and I'm gonna set as base. So boy, you sure get used to hitting update and set as base. And now I've got my workspace and my widget. The final step, really step 3, is this forking the boot script. So this is really like the raw first lines of JavaScript that are executed by ChiliPeppr based on the URL that you go to. Okay, so you'll see what I mean. I'm going to fork this boot script, and I'm going to pick a new URL of hello world. Okay, and I'm going to hit tab. It's going to look it up to see if it's available, and it is telling the URL is available for your use. Since we're in forking mode, we just copied the JavaScript from the TinyG. So load script for TinyG, I'm going to change that to say load script for hello world, and then it just does a console log statement, now loading hello world, and then it does a ChiliPeppr load. You saw that earlier when I was adding the widget itself. I had to do a ChiliPeppr load. It's going to swap it into the panel workspace, which is the core workspace. It's sort of the whole view below the header. And then this right here is what's so important. So I'm going to go back, steal this identifier, paste it in here, and then I will just change this comment to say hello world workspace done loading. This is just the callback function that's called once it's done running. If you needed to do any init on your stuff, you could do it here. But generally, I don't need to do any init functions. So I'm going to save changes. It says successfully saved, navigate to your new workspace. So this is the moment of truth. When I click this, and I hope to God it works, it should pull up our brand new workspace. Let's try it. Hello world. And there it is. And we are done. We now have a new widget. We have a new workspace, a new hello world widget, and it inherited all the hard work from all of the people before us. So there you go. I do think one of the next steps I want to show is how to do a pub sub, though, because that's when it gets pretty exciting.
Right, right. So right now, you deleted all of that stuff because you forked it from TinyG widget, and then you got rid of most of it. Is that how it worked?
Yep.
Yeah. Right. So it doesn't really subscribe to anything at the moment.
It doesn't do anything. Yeah. So
gotcha.
Let's go ahead and have it subscribe. Now here's what's really cool. Now if I make updates, you'll see them real time. So let's just add some blah, blah, blah. And I'll run it here. There's my blah, blah, blah. If I went back and loaded it, it's not going to be there because I didn't update the base inside JS Fiddle. So make sure if you go back here to reload and you don't see it, you aren't pulling your hair out. So I'm going to go back and now I'm going to update it again. I get version 2. I do feel like I'm maybe abusing JS Fiddle a little bit because of this, but now I'm going to go back and reload, and I should see my blah, blah, blah. There it is, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so let's go ahead and respond to something. The first thing I want to respond to is I'm going to respond to an onConnect statement. So I know when the serial port connects, it sends this little signal of WS onConnect. So WebSocket onConnect, or it will say like a receive line, or a list. But let's just do the onConnect, okay? And I think that's, let's see. Yeah, I think that one's pretty good to pivot off of. And so what we'll do is we'll go back, and in our init, okay, we will say ChiliPeppr.subscribe. We're going to subscribe to a signal, and then you get a function callback when it's done. Oh, you can also pass it the context. I'll just say this. That way your this is correctly set inside the callback. And I'm going to add a comment saying we want. Okay. And then I'll just do a console. But I got to put the signal I'm subscribing to. So I had the end part, the WS onConnect, but every signal has this at the prefix of it. the ID. So, and it's really like a folder structure. So there it is. That's the signal. And then we signal. And then what I'll do is I will shove some content in here where the blah 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 is when we get it. So I'm going to steal this ID and I'm just going to do a little jQuery and I'm just going to say dot text we got the WF. Okay. I'll add a timestamp.
So you have to write tests for all this stuff, right, to get it to like run in the fiddle?
You know, you could, and so I'll try that. So I'm going to run that, make sure, I'm going to open up the JavaScript console now just to make sure I don't get any errors. So that looks good. And then what I'll do is I will send a publish in the test just to, so ChiliPeppr.publish. This is what the serial port widget would do. And then I'll just, I don't remember what the payload is. I think the payload's empty. So I should now get this updated. The question, yeah, so see, I got it. We got the onConnect signal. So I'm mimicking that publish. What I kind of like to do is do a set timeout on signals. Signals never really would come in immediately on load. So we'll do a set timeout of like a second later. In fact, I'll do it 3 seconds later just to give you an idea. Okay, so it loads. It's got the blah, blah, blah. And then I should, yeah, there we go. Got the onConnect signal. Okay, so let's update that. Set as base. And we'll go back and we will reload. And we should get content updated in here. When there it is. We got the onConnect signal. So that's your first sort of moment of truth of this widget is now interacting with all the other widgets through the PubSub model. We should be good citizens of the environment and now say that we are foreign subscribing to that signal. That should say here, and we should sort of explain why we're subscribing to it. One of the reasons, too, is you can return false in your method and make anything else listening to the signal not get it, which is cool, but it's also dangerous. So it is why it's pretty important to sort of, you know, if I put return false here, any other widget is just not going to get it. The other thing you can do, too, is when you subscribe, I'm sorry, when you subscribe, you can subscribe at a higher or lower priority. It is probably worth noting I'm using amplified as PubSub, which Riley, we probably want to put in the docs. And
yeah, maybe there's a developer section, like
yeah, I'm in the wrong section. Whoops, documentation. Here it is, PubSub, and their subscribes, I'm just wrapping in the ChiliPeppr. So this priority on the subscribe and stuff like that, you probably don't need it that much. I have actually only used the priority once, but it does sort of help if you're trying to get fancy. Okay, so let's, instead of doing text, let's just append so we kind of see what's going on. We will append that with, we'll just throw that, I guess, in a div. And of course, this is where it helps to know HTML as well. And now it should just append. There it is. Okay. And then we will clean this up. Okay. So we'll hit update and then base. And I want to just show you that because when we come back here, I'll connect and disconnect a few times. And you'll just see it keeps piling up. So Riley, I think if you were, for instance, going to do a widget that looked at the firmware, So we got an on connect. I'm going to disconnect, and then we should get an on connect again. I'm going to disconnect. In fact, I'll connect to my Arduino now. So that's generally how that's working. So this, for instance, listens to the TinyG widget, listens to the on connect, and it then sends these commands once it sees the connect. So let's go ahead and have this send the command for.
What widget is doing the on or sending the on connect? Well, once it gets an on
serial
connect.
port. So
Okay.
yeah, and so look, that's the way. That's why that pub sub. And remember, I was talking to you about the publish
Oh,
subscribes that are
right.
owned
Yeah.
by a widget, and then the publish. It can get confusing, and so I did that nomenclature to try and make sure you understood that it is this one that owns the on connect. It owns it. It's the one that generates it from scratch. Anything else subscribing really is a foreign subscriber.
Okay, I see.
And of course, you can own subscribing to a signal like the send signal, which other ones publish to. It's sort of the inverse, but this is like the parent widget owning it, because when it gets a send, it is then sending it down to the WebSocket server to the serial port device. So let's mimic what the TinyG is doing in terms of how it sends those config commands. So you got to kind of just go through here and you say, okay, look, it subscribes. It's clearly subscribing in a foreign subscribe to the on connect. And we see a new connect query for status. So what does it do to query for status? Well, it probably does a foreign publish. And so we're going to steal this. And sure enough, we send to the serial port certain commands like the initial configuration for TinyG to be in the correct mode and to get initial statuses like the XYZ chord. So I'm going to steal this. I'm going to go over to this widget, and after I get the callback on the subscribe, I want to send so
It's like FB and null.
okay, so I got to publish to that signal, and then what is it? FB? Is it JSON?
Yeah, if you're gonna send JSON, yeah, there you go. You're gonna have to escape those. That works too.
FB?
Yeah, FB, and then again, yeah, and then just that, another quote.
Oh, just to end it.
Yeah, you
Okay.
can do it like that. Make sure you do a new line, unless your sender is
Oh
doing
yeah,
that.
you're right. I've got to do new lines because this one expects that, and that is an area worth noting. Okay, so here's the thing though. When the serial port subscribe, I publish. Otherwise, the data is already coming back. But we'll just leave this as a okay. So we'll run that. We should be okay. But you should see that publish after my fake test code is run. So see that publish call. That looks good. So let's update that. Set as base. By the way, you could bring in the serial port widget to this environment through your test code if you don't want to keep switching back to the main workspace.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Okay, so let's reload. And then we should be able to, once that on connect happens, we should be able to see, yeah, see the FB was now sent right here. It was probably sent a little too quick, but maybe not, because we got back the FB. So
No,
we
it's
were
fine.
connected.
Because so FB is a getter, and you're not setting anything with it. So the setting of TinyG variables or config variables can get dicey, where you need to do the like timeout because it shuts down the interrupts and all that stuff to write to the EPROM, which
Yeah.
is we discussed earlier, but just so everyone else knows, it's a limitation with the X mega chip. It's how you write to the EPROM, but and then like V9s and the G2 code base. in the ARM stuff, it shouldn't be a problem.
So for that. So what I've got to do is I now have to subscribe to the incoming data. Now, if you don't know what that looks like, you got to think, okay, which widget subscribes to incoming data to pivot off of? Well, the axes must, otherwise how would they update? So let's go see if we can steal some knowledge, and sure enough, they do a foreign subscribe to axes, units, planner pause, and planner resume. Okay, that feels too high level. So this guy's got to subscribe, otherwise it wouldn't have shown me the FB. So what does he subscribe to? I'm going to steal that idea from this widget. Okay, he subscribes to receive line, receive, and list. So I'm going to subscribe to receive line. I'm just going to steal that signal. Oops. And we'll do a ChiliPeppr to that signal. And then this to make sure it passes in the correct context, and then my function callback.
Does
data.
all receive line go through your axes widget?
The axes widget does not get a receive line. It gets higher level callbacks from the TinyG widget. So the TinyG widget gets a receive line.
Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. I'm confused. You're on the TinyG widget right now.
I'm in the Hello World widget.
Gotcha.
You can always tell by that title up here.
Yep, gotcha.
And of course the title over here. So subscribe, serial port, receive line, this, function data. And then what I'll do, since this is getting a little bit long, I'll just kind of, so it's a little cleaner. And then I got to make sure, yeah, that looks correct. And so we'll do a console.log. I got serial port, and then out what the data is, just to try that. In fact, because there's so many things in the console these days, I'm going to just put a big fat hello world, and then I'm going to test it. So I'm going to update it, set as base, go back here. This time I'm going to open the JavaScript console to see what's going on. This can get a little overwhelming, but let's just go back a little bit. Let's make sure we did in fact get our FB. I'm kind of running out of room here. Damn. I don't know if I did.
+1 for minimize button.
Yeah, really. Well, I don't have to do it this way, but I know I saw some hello world blow by. Well, you know what I can do. Just to make sure, we're going to send a command to, we'll do like a status report. And I should get a receive line back. You know what? I didn't, and I'm in unknown, so let's see what happened here. No, you know what? It looks like my serial port server died. So this is what I was talking about earlier. If you send data too quickly on connect, it seems to throw off the serial port server. So let me restart that. That is just too bad. Yeah, it crashed. We'll relaunch. And it only does that on the get list of ports. It never does it during the sending of data. So at least
that's really cool.
At least the critical parts, and then I should just be able to hit reconnect. There it is. And then I will reconnect. Oh! No, it crashed again. Damn. You know, I think what's happening is in my widget, I may be sending data too quickly. I subscribe and I publish and I do a send. So this is exactly what's happening. The moment this loads, it publishes that data and it's shoving it into the WebSocket server too quick before the port is actually open. It's kind of just catching it within milliseconds. So need to fix that, but for now, how I've been getting around it is just doing a set timeout. Remember we were talking earlier about, you know, you're getting into rough territory when you start putting artificial delay.
Yeah.
But for now, just to get through this, we will do we'll do like a 3 second timeout.
Dennis on the call or in the viewer section, he's actually a quite accomplished Node.js developer. So he was actually talking about how Go and Node.js kind of port very easily between the two. So
Yeah,
curious.
and that's what we were talking about earlier today, is maybe it is better to go Node.js for the serial port server. I will say there's not that much code to the serial port server
Yeah, it'd
yet.
be interesting to talking to him more about like what he thinks about it because he's
Yeah,
got
I mean, look,
quite
the
a bit of
code
experience.
is just this that I've got pulled up, just a few classes, and they're pretty simple. Like the serial list, there's nothing to it. It's just that I do a different type of serial list on Windows versus Linux because you gotta query, the PNP entity database on Windows to get like the friendly name. You don't even have to do it that way if you just want COM21, COM22, but I wanted pretty names. So it really could get redone, and it is just a WebSocket server, so it could go other ways. Okay, so let's go ahead and update that. Set as base and rerun. We should be. I'm gonna have to restart my socket again. Oh no, it is running. There it is. You can see the output there. It didn't crash. It's looking good.
Nice.
Okay, we'll reconnect, and now there's the planner buffer at 28. Let's get this a little bigger. And we're getting all of our good data back. Notice the FB command is right
Yeah, the
there.
hello world is thrown by.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of hello worlds. Now, what you got to do though is you're getting all these different payloads passed in. What you want
Oh,
to
right.
actually analyze each one and look for that object. So I'm gonna since I know it's gonna come back and look like this, in my hello world, I could just say, var object equals JSON, or I'm sorry, parse JSON. Let me make sure I've got that right. jQuery JSON. Yeah, parse JSON. So we'll type that correct, and then we'll just make sure we have it correct. You just pass in the JSON, it passes back the object. So the JSON is let's make sure we've got it correct. It is just, actually, I'm thinking I get it back as an object. I do. I get the WebSocket, the port, and the data line. Um, so if you're trying to filter on ports as well, I'm not going to because I'm only in single port mode. So I am just going to look for the data line. So it's really data.data line. Was that all lowercase? Yeah. So that's the string that I'm going to parse. And just for the heck of it, I'm going to say my object, and then spit that out. At this point, I'm going to try and mimic the this pub sub so that I don't have to keep switching back here. So I'm going to just copy, bring it over here, go back to my test statement. I guess I'll copy this one. And this is a publish of this signal. And the payload is this object. Now this is a true object, so I'm going to have to say var, and then we have to convert these to be new lines. And I think that should do it. Yeah, that should. And then I'm going to pass that as the payload. So we should get a good mimic. And let's bump this to the 1,000, and we'll do this at 2 seconds. Unexpected identifier in line 40. So let's make sure we type that okay. Let's clean that up a little. This looks okay. I don't really need a semicolon there, but So we published that. Line 40 is going to be further down. It's probably not liking this. So let's just quickly make sure. Line 43. These lines are never quite lining up, so I guess we'll go in and look at here. End test. Oh, doesn't like my test. What did I do wrong in this? Function, ChiliPeppr publish. Oh, you know why? I gotta put this in single quotes. Cool. Let's just run it one more time. Okay. I got my serial port data. So obviously, I'm only getting that because I faked it. And so I published. So now what I want to do is just make sure it's parsing it correctly. We'll spit the object out, but R in, and what that's going to test for is this top level object exist?
Which
and then,
R is a response object.
Yep, and if it does, I'm going to say also if FB is in object.R. That means I've got myself an FB response. Okay, I'm going to get every piece of serial data, but I only want that one. Got my that should do it. Let's see if I get my little got FB response. I'm not seeing it. So here's my object, and it's got an R. Oh, it's got an F. Am I looking at that correctly? It's got an FB and it's got an F. Why would that not? What did I publish? Oh.
I don't see the FB.
No, you're right. I pulled the wrong publish call. Well, we'll just cheat. We'll just steal this one that I grabbed out of the console earlier. Well, at least it worked correctly. Right? This is a QV response. There,
Yeah.
that's the one we're looking for. Okay, so let's try that. And I got my FB response. So at that point, I could analyze if I have the correct version or not, which is what you're after. So
right, which would be actually another web call to like the GitHub repo about like for master or something like that.
Yeah. But. Okay. Right. So call GitHub, blah blah blah. You know, you have work to do there. So what I'll do for now is I will just spit it out into this into the DOM that I got an FB response and what the version is. So here we'll just rebuild. We'll say I'm trying to figure out where that append state. Oh, here it is. We'll just copy this and we'll spit out what version is running, like what firmware. It's the 380.08 is the version? Or the firmware build?
That will be, yeah. I mean, or 429.01, which is the newer one.
Yeah, so this is object.r.fb. So we should see it in here. There it is. Okay.
Sweet.
Update it. Set as base. Remember, all that test code we did gets removed when you load it into the main one, so you don't have to worry about it. And let's see what firmware build we're on. There it is.
Cool. So, just for like everyone else watching this, if they come up with a super whiz-bang widget, how is the best way to get it attached to your TinyG web space, your personal one, which is the, I guess you'd say master on the ChiliPeppr.com website?
Anybody can create a root URL. The same way GitHub sort of lets you create whatever. The only difference is I'm making it at the top level. I'm not making it be like user ID / your name. maybe that's a bad call, but I don't think that we'd have as many workspaces as like a GitHub. So, that's why once you're in this fork or edit of the boot JavaScript, you're picking a name from the top layer, and that's your new URL. So that's
Right,
all it
but
really
what
takes.
I'm saying is like if we made this super whiz bang updater, like I'm gonna go to you, John, and I'm personally, since we know each other, gonna go, hey John, I got this updater here. Let's get it included in TinyG.
I
Um,
think what you really should do, Riley, is make your own workspace called TinyG Riley or TinyG V2. Get
okay.
it to be happy, and then you almost just need to, in an offline channel, go ask if somebody can change their widget to point to yours.
Almost kind of like a pull request. I'm just trying to think about
Yeah.
like the best way about that. So as
Yeah.
long as it's been tested, you've got all your tests in there. It seems to be working. I guess just message the person that it belongs to.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we could get more structured on push and pull requests, like what GitHub does, or maybe we could even use it through GitHub. Let's just kind of see how that goes. I feel like if we just do that through more of a manual channel for now, that's okay too.
Okay. All right. Good. Well, this has been really informative.
Yeah, we got our hello world.
We do. And so I guess really you don't delete your widget. I'll probably just extend it and make it a little different.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that way, since you've already got it in there, I can kind of like go from there.
Yeah. All right,
Cool.
cool.
Well, hey, thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate it very much, John.
All right. Talk to you
All
later.
right. All right. See you guys. Bye.